So, Andy, Paul, 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. He won the Electoral College and the popular vote for the President of the United States. His program wasn't hidden, it was out in the open. He campaigned on mass deportation, on unadulterated hate for women. He held a Nazi rally just before the election in Madison Square Garden. And almost every demographic, support for Trump has increased. After 4 years in power, full of Muslim bans and family separation, of unleashing federal forces to crack down on protests, of vitriolic attacks on LGBTQ people, and facilitating the overturn of Roe, of the violent coup attempt planned out in the open. And he has only become more unhinged since. One of the things that shocks so many decent people, and if it doesn't shock them, they're at least deeply confused and reeling as to how this happened. How tens of millions of people, more than last time, said yes to this overt racist, misogynist fascist. Why? Why did this happen? I was wondering, Andy, if you wanted to start with that.
I want to, once again, now that everybody's tuned in, thank you for hosting this again, and thank the people who are listening online, watching online. And I'm just going to let everybody online know that I'm sitting here at the RevCom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity headquarters in Los Angeles, and there's an audience here. Let them know you're here, everybody. So your question was, why did so many people vote for Trump? Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well.
More so than last time.
Because this is a country full of fascists and millions of more people who are okay with fascism. They're okay with women being stripped of the right to abortion in their own integrity. They're okay with the degradation of immigrants. They're okay with everything that comes with this fascist regime, and that millions of people, tens of millions, being affected by climate change that was, yes, present under and accelerated under Obama, yes, but under Biden and Harris, but will go on steroids once again under Trump. They're okay with all that as long as they're okay. But why is that the case? Why are we in a nation full of fascists? Well, because it's woven into the whole history of this country and into the foundation of this country in the capitalist imperialist system. But look, Bob Avakian has just put out, Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader, I'm going to say something about him in this first comment, but I just want to say he's put out a very important social media message in his series of social media messages on all platforms titled "Two Countries Within This Country." The whole damn system's got to go. And this is very important. This is not a time for demoralization and despair. It's a time for righteous anger and revolutionary determination. Revolutionary determination. Because part of the reason we have this fascism resurgent is because of the contradictions in the system itself and how it was woven into the history of this country, from slavery to the beginning with the genocide of the native people, and to the very system we live under that has continued down to today. And you need to get into this article, but something Bob Avakian points out in this article is that the fascists have tremendous initiative because they represent a very powerful section of the ruling class that sees this is the way to rule, to break the previous normal ways that things happened in this country, to be able to get a different way to rule this system. Whereas the Democrats have been consistently and constantly and can do no other than to try and keep things within the bounds of the normal way this system has functioned, including that they don't want to unleash mass struggle among the very people who they have come to represent, and they're actually losing at this point. People who have been suffering from various forms of oppression under this system. They don't want to unleash that because that might create some questions of why is it this way, and then what do we do about it? And that's something I want to get into through the course of this discussion, Sam. But I do want to refer to the previous social message from Bob Avakian, number 101, where he says it is time to look seriously for solutions outside and beyond this system, outside this system, not within the confines, of the electoral system. And look, I just have to stop right there for 1 second, if I could just take a moment. What are the people in that one country, not the fascist country, but the other country of people who want a decent future, who care about humanity to some extent, and maybe to a great extent in many cases? What are they being told? They're being told to figure out, why did Kamala lose? Whose fault is it? And they're also being told, let's get busy for the next election. This is a losing strategy, particularly in this time, and I'm not going to go into that right now about what has changed. Sam, you just did some of that. They're being told, if you don't like the candidates, run yourself. This is no answer. We have to be outside the normal political processes, and we have to go beyond this system and fight for a radically new world, for a whole different way we could be living, a fundamentally different system. I want to get into that also later on in this. But I want to, since you mentioned in the introduction, and I've quoted Bob Avakian twice in his last two social medias, I want to say something about Bob Avakian to those people who are listening to this live stream for the first time. And I want to remind those who are more familiar with Bob Avakian what you have in this leader, that he's not like any of these leaders that I just was speaking of, these bourgeois leaders who try to find a way to work within the bounds of this system. Bob Avakian has developed a more scientific way to look at the world and to understand the problems we face and the solution in an actual revolution for what? To emancipate all of humanity. This is a tremendous thing. We have been weighed down for generations now, for decades, under the weight that no other world is possible, that this is just the way it has to be. But that's not true. And if Bob Avakian, alone among the people who led and were part of the major upsurges of the 1960s, went to work to figure out and to develop a new communism, a way we could get free from all this exploitation and oppression, get on the road to emancipating humanity here and all over the world. This is very important for you to get into, because we are facing a horrific situation with the Trump-Vance fascist regime, and we have to get free of this.
Paul, there are a lot of people right now who did not expect this, who thought maybe he'd get he'd win via the electoral college, but they didn't think that he'd win the popular vote. Why did that happen, and what does this mean?
Well, let me just say, first of all, hello, LA, hello, Philadelphia. I'm in the middle in Chicago. I wish I was out there with my friends in LA. It just seems like I was just there recently. So I was sitting next to you, looking over that way. So hello to all my wonderful friends in LA and all across the country. Sam, I think actually Trump's popular vote is up to 74 million and maybe heading to 80 million. So it's pretty freaking bad, right? Why did all these people vote for a white supremacist, misogynist, fascist? Because white supremacism is alive and well in the United States of America. It's foundational to the country, and it has stayed intact, and it's risen and fallen, and it's back again today. The whole illusion that we'd gone beyond race under Obama was just this toxic delusion that was blown away almost immediately by the Tea Party, and then by the birther phenomena, and then by the Trump presidency, because patriarchy and sexism are foundational to this country and are alive and well and continue to this day. The same goes for nativism and immigrant bashing and all of that. That's why we've got tens and millions of race, white supremacists, sexists, and fascists in the country because of capitalism. because of capitalism in a couple of ways. One, capitalism sort of wages this constant underlying, it's not simple and it's not mechanistic, but an underlying war on belief in democracy, and tends to create a context within which authoritarians naturally arise on the basis of profound inequality and the undermining of the constant undermining of the system's pretenses of democracy and the system's constant generation of different crises that require government intervention. But without democracy, it's with authoritarian rule. And under capitalism, that's always going to be a right-wing authoritarian, never a left-wing authoritarian. But because capitalism as a system relies on white supremacism, appropriates it, transforms it, puts it to use for its own purposes. Capitalism, imperialism as a system relies on patriarchy and misogyny, appropriates it, transforms it, puts it to its own uses. Capitalism, imperialism, a system relies on immigrant bashing and nationalism and nativism, appropriates them, transforms them, puts them to their own uses. We have an underlying capitalist system that can't let go of those things, that's dialectically bound up with those things. And it constantly, this system, this underlying class rule system of capitalism is constantly stirring up and pitting people against one another as individuals, but also as groups. And it is constantly exacerbating and re-aggravating racial and gender and nationality and other kinds of divisions. Now, the Democrats are all caught up in a blame game now, and they're going after each other, and all these politicos and talking heads on cable news are getting into, all the various things that used to interest me a whole heck of a lot about why did they lose? What could they have done different? And we're hearing about how decrepit Biden was and what a terrible president he was and how he hung on too long and he waited too long before he passed the baton on to Kamala Harris. So Biden's late exit. We're hearing about what a horrible candidate Kamala Harris was, how she ran too far to the center. We're hearing from Bernie Sanders about the Democratic Party abandoned the working class, and now the working class has abandoned them, sort of almost as if the Republican Party now is a working class party, which it really isn't. And people are angry at then some centrists are angry at the Democratic Party for supposedly running too far to the progressive left, by which they mean identity politics. There's a lot of discussion about the role that social media plays and just in polarizing the country and just creating a fact-free neo-fascist right-wing universe where fascist values are propagated and never come up against any kind of challenge. There's a lot of talk I've written about the role that the mainstream media has played in normalizing the fascism of Trump by just calling it populism, by saying that the Republicans are a working class populist party, and just acting like this was just a normal election when it's anything but. It was a fascist election. It is not my job. It is not our job to help the Democrats fix their party. I don't think it can be fixed. It's not my job to tell them why they lost the election. And it's certainly not my job to try to tell them how they can win an election in 28 or in 2032 and 2036. This shit that's going on in the world, courtesy of capitalism, imperialism, ecocide, the drift towards nuclear war, the fascism that is being spread across not just this country, but other countries. This stuff is moving way too fucking fast for people to be sitting around agonizing about whether they should be running Pete Buttigieg in 2032 and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2036. We don't have any time for that bourgeois electoral bullshit, for the quicksand and the siren songs of American electoral politics. The Democrats didn't fight back against fascism, not because they made the wrong decisions. They could have done this or they could have done that. They can't. They can't do it. Of necessity, they can't do it because they can't function outside the boundaries of the capitalist system that requires the racism, that requires the sexism, that requires the nativism, that are all bound up with their system, with their underlying class rule system. They just can't do it. They can't arouse people to rise up and fight beyond elections. They are all about elections. They are horrified of the notion of people stepping outside of the quadrennial electoral candidate-centered big money electoral extravaganzas that they think they control. They are horrified of mobilizing people en masse in the streets, in the public squares, beneath and beyond these holy quadrennial election days. They are horrified of admitting that half the country, well, that's not actually true, but we say that a lot, that so many people in the country have gone fascist. They can't admit it. It doesn't fit their wonderful American exceptionalist image of the United States of America as this perfect land of liberty and equal opportunity and freedom. Bob Avakian's right. America, your city on a hill is chock full of fascists. They just don't want to deal with that. And they also, by the way, don't want to deal with this underlying right-tilted slave owners, minority rule constitution from the 18th century that we're still dealing with in 2024. I realize it's been transformed in a lot of ways since and had to be updated in connection with the needs of modern American imperialism. But it's just astonishing that we're still with this insane right-tilted electoral college. We are still with this insane right-tilted absurdly powerful and mal-apportioned Senate. We're still with this insanely lifetime appointed Supreme Court that is put together by these undemocratically elected bodies and all of that kind of shit. And they just can't let go of that stuff. And since they can't let go of capitalism and they can't let go of the Constitution, 3 cheers for Bob Avakian's draft Constitution for a Socialist Republic of North America. Everybody needs to read that now. They need to read it quick, fast, and in a hurry. They can't drop these things, which means they can't fight back, which means we cannot rely on them. The resistance that we need against the new Americana fascism, I am wrapping up, Sam, cannot be about going back to the way things were. And it cannot be about trying to put the Democratic Party back in power and helping them figure out how the fuck to win in 2028 or 2032 or 2036 when the world might be a burning crisp of climate-baked nothingness or a nuclear winter hell. Not that, no. I'll sign
No,
up.
I think it's really important that we are grounded in this moment that we're in and what we're actually up against. I do, both of you spoke to this some, but one of the things that I've been hearing from people a lot in the days since the results came in, where we survived a Trump presidency before, we can do it again. And I was hoping that you could share your thoughts on what we face, what humanity faces now with a Trump return to the White House that is different. And that might be speaking to how MAGA has changed. It might be speaking to world dynamics that changed. It might be speaking to however you want to go at that question. It might be, continuing on why there's no going back to normal. However you want to take it. Andy, do you want to go first?
We survived Trump the first time, but why can't we do that this time, right? That's what you're asking. Well, the first response I would have to that is we who? We who? The kids who were separated from their parents, the parents who were sent home and left their kids here? The women who lost the right to control their own bodies? That they're not part of we? Where's your sense of justice? Where's your sense of humanity? You lost some of that during the Trump-Pence regime. And you're going to lose it all under the Trump-Vance regime if you don't understand what it is we're facing in this system of capitalism, imperialism, and how it spawned and gave birth to this malignant fascism. And it's not just got Trump's name on it. It has Trump's name on it here now. But it also is going all around the world. And you see these fascists here going over to Orban, learning from him, from Erdogan in Turkey. The capitalist imperialist system has outlived its usefulness, if it ever had any usefulness. And I'm not going to debate that now. But it's long since passed, long since passed. And it spawned a movement now around the world to tighten up, to dispense with any pretenses of rights of the people, to be able to enforce the dictates of capitalism, imperialism. Somebody wrote in the column I saw, well, wait a second, not all these people who voted for Trump are fascists. They're just trying to feed their families. They're hurting economically. Yes, they are hurting economically, but that is not the point. There's no way anybody who's halfway sentient, which means they can think and are aware, cannot know who Donald Trump is and what he does. They cannot know that he said, you see a woman walking down the street, and if you've got enough money and you're famous, you can grab him by the pussy. That's what he said 8 years ago. And everything since has made that seem like Sunday school. So you know what he is, and you're okay with that. Why? Because you're concerned with your own standard of living, but you're not thinking about all these other people and all these other people around the world. Look at your clothes, see where they're made. And just by the way, the reason you don't have the standard of living that you would like to have is because the workings of this system compels the capitalists to move that production overseas. And we don't have time for a whole discussion of this, but it is the workings of the system that sets everybody against each other. And then the capitalists themselves are set against each other. And that creates a society where people think things are just selfishness. It's not just selfishness, it's a selfishness created by the very workings of the system. And this again is where I wanted to drive you to look at the science that's been developed by Bob Avakian's being delivered in each of these social media messages. Like I said, I read from the title of number 102. This is really an extraordinary body of work. But are we going to survive this? That's all my first point. The second point is you're not getting what you're facing in this fascism from Trump at this point. Sam brought some of this out in her opening. Paul spoke more about it. But we have to be very clear that when Trump came into power outside the normal channels and stuff, he didn't know how the system actually worked fully. He knew that he wanted to smash it and change it in a fascist direction. But he brought in people, and this gives you some character of the man. He wanted to have his generals, people who look like generals, and they would say sir to him. But it turned out that some of these people, vicious murderers in Iraq and in wars from Vietnam up to the present, but nonetheless, they felt that they wanted to stick by the Constitution of the United States, and they blocked him. That's all gone. That's all gone. All the guardrails are gone. He's put together over 4 years, while people were paying attention to the Democrats telling you how loony he was and this and that and getting all into personality questions. He put together an organization that's developed a full-out fascist program, and they're intending to do it. I just want to read you some things of what these people are saying so you get some idea of what's involved here. This is Steve Bannon says right after the election, right after he got out of jail, but after the election, Democrats and their institutions don't deserve any respect. You don't deserve any empathy, and you don't deserve any pity. You deserve what we call rough Roman justice, and we're prepared to give it to you. Nick Fuentes, a fascist leader, says to women, your body, my choice. Another one of these fascist podcasters says, women, back to the kitchen, abortions, illegal, gays, back in the closet, interracial marriage, banned, illegals, pack your bag, trannies, back to the asylums, Jesus back in our schools. We are so back. And Russell Brand says, this is the day that the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. I could go on and on with this. This is some serious shit we're facing, people. You think you're going to sit around and have a bunch of discussions about how you're going to run for Congress if you don't like the candidates, run yourself. Well, let me tell you something Bob Avakian said a long time ago. He said, if you try to make the Democrats what they are not and can never be, including if you try to run yourself and become a Democrat, you will end up being more like what the Democrats actually are. You want to know what they are? I would give you Gaza. And I would tell you to sit in front of YouTube and watch video after video after video and say, this is what I want to be. This is who I want to support. Look, Paul is right. White supremacy, misogyny, xenophobia, the hatred of LGBTQ people. This is baked into the system because it's a system that depends on keeping subordinated to the system itself, setting people against each other. White supremacy and capitalism, Baba Vakinist said, are woven together. You try to get rid of one, you have to get rid of the other. You can't do it. It's the fabric of America. So,
Absolutely, Andy. I was, as you were reading some of the
okay.
quotes, I was thinking about something that a neighbor had, come up to me and told me about earlier today was uh, middle school students are being mobilized around the same language that Nick Fuentes has been using. And there's massive bullying in addition to overall online misogynist attacks on women using the language of your body, my choice. And 12-year-olds being bombarded at school with this message from their peers. It's a whole culture that is being unleashed around this, that is not waiting until they hold power. And the same, very similar language has reasserting the worst of this country's slaveholding history has been directed in massive amounts of text messages that have gone out to Black folks. This is going into the real world real quick. These aren't just words that get put out, you know.
This whole system is rotten and illegitimate. We need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system. And that's gone into, as for those of you who watched the last live stream and watch our show, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, Sansara, myself, and others on the show, Raphael, hold this up. We need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system that is talking about in the situation that we face. People are going to confront a disruption in the way things have been that they've never experienced in this country. It's going to be a sea change. And Paul spoke earlier about the US Constitution with a great deal of poetry, and he's made the point that this is a slave owner's document and a capitalist exploiter's document. And we see in this situation, in the midst of all this resistance, raising this demand that says the existing capitalist imperialist system and the institutions of government of this country must be abolished and replaced by a new socialist system based on the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America. And what is the difference between these two constitutions? The one that should be abolished protects the right of property, protects the rights, and confines people within competing with each other over who can be exploited more efficiently. It confines all the struggles within terms that actually work within a capitalist system, a system that is based on exploitation and oppression. The Constitution for the New Socialist Republic, on the other hand, that's outlined in 6 points in this brochure that I just laid out, talks about how this Constitution empowers the masses of people to go to work on overcoming all forms of exploitation and oppression. It sets a whole different way that elections take place, a whole different set of rights for people. The most important right is the masses of people having the right to have a real say over what kind of society they live in. Not every 4 years get to vote for which exploiter you want to head things up, but to actually be shaping the direction of society. And it has a lot of different principles in it. The right to dissent and also funds dissent, nothing that's even close in the US Constitution, let alone any other constitution, even in any other socialist country that's ever existed or constitution that's been written. It's extraordinary. You need to read this, as Paul Street said before.
I am very struck by the difference between 2016, even in little old Iowa City. 200 of us the Friday after the election went out and shut down the eastbound Interstate 80. And my comrades here in Chicago are telling me about there were just masses in the loop, all like 2 days after. However, there are going to be no small number of pitch points Probably in the first 6 months of this administration, there's going to be any number of single issues that are probably going to rile people up. I don't know how many people are going to the streets. We're going to find out. We're going to try and make it as much as possible. They're going to tear up environmental regulations. They're going to go drill, drill, drill. They're going to do huge tax cuts. They're going to do inflationary tariffs. I mean, the big one, the obvious one that I see a physical confrontation about is the threat of citing the Alien Enemy Act of 1798 to justify sending in the U.S. Army to round up so-called illegal aliens. And I think absolutely that that's coming. And I think as people do come out of their sleepwalking and come out of their shock, I hope with help from us, Fuse Fascism people, Rev Corps people, and others, that, you know, we organize around more than just single issues and get it that we need a cohesive, consistent, disciplined organization to put forth a vision of an alternative society beneath and beyond sporadic protests. Enough of I've lived through, I've been blown away and very excited momentarily by numerous mass protests in my lifetime. May 1st, 2006, the global justice movement in Seattle movement, late 1990s, the march against the Iraq war, even George Floyd on a truly enormous scale, but then to see them fade and fall back into the woodwork of the quadrennial election cycle. And we really have to push hard to go beyond just sporadic protests and get people and always frame everything in terms of the roots, the underlying political economic system that produced this, all the way down to the mode of production and back up to the political superstructure and back again, and drive home. It's the system. I think a lot of our challenges with people right now are about how they're thinking. They're at the level of epistemology, literally how you're processing events. No to trying to get the Democrats back in power. No to the notion that elections are the solution. I understand that people are mourning. I understand why people are crying. I understand why people are even weeping. I get it. But at a certain point, we got to get past the weepiness and the sadness and the related fatalism. The correct response to this election is anger, righteous fucking anger at the choices that were put up before us and the system that rests behind those limited choices. Get past this, how the Democrats can do better next time. And also, we got to fight this impulse that some people have towards minimization, pretending that this is all just rhetoric. This is just shit Trump says. This was just campaign rhetoric. He really doesn't mean it. When he says brown-skinned immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, he says he's going to declare the Insurrection Act. He says he's going to send the army in to end crime in one day. Translation, extrajudicial executions in the streets of the west side of Chicago and south side of Chicago and South Central and Bed-Stuy and the black neighborhoods of this country. All of that. No, fuck no. He means what he's saying. They're going to do this shit. They've got the trifecta. They've got the forces in place. They have allies in the local police departments, in the county police departments, and in state governments, in the court system. Internal exile. All these people are talking about, well, I'm going to go, you know, it's like Masha Gessen talks about how people responded to authoritarianism in Russia and they just went into their own internal lives. Well, that's not going to fix anything. Sorry, that's not going to work. If you think you can escape what these motherfuckers are doing to the planet and to our society with an internal exile, well, I mean, I just saw in the news these very nice middle-class people outside LA who just lost their homes in this incredible wildfire that just ravaged, you know, this ecological crisis. This ecological crisis is not going away. Light, I'm going to move to another country. How many people are saying that, though? That doesn't fix anything. I suppose it momentarily could make your personal experience better, but it's not going to fix a goddamn thing. And can you really escape the clutches and the reaches of capitalism, imperialism anyway? I don't think you can. And then waiting around for labor, and we're going to wait. Someday the working class is going to rise up, and all this talk about trade unions, and we'll get some collective bargaining agreements, and somehow the UAW is somehow going to turn into a radical leftist organization. I don't think so. I did a piece years ago called The Lame Left, 17 Afflictions, and I went through all these mindsets, you know, identitarianism, trade unionism, economism, localism, fatalism, pessimism, direct servicism, anarchism, revengeism, and all of that. It's all got to go. It's all got to go. And the organizations, the only organization that I've seen, and as I was writing this, I was thinking this, I've seen shed themselves of all the residue of the past dysfunctional ways of responding to capitalism, imperialism, and its progeny called fascism, or will refuse fascism, and the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. And I really think that's where people are going to need to turn to find real answers to the work of Avakian. It's so important to promote Avakian's work right now. This guy is coming out with dead-on analysis that really knock me out and how perceptive they are just about every other day. I guess the last one is number 102. They are really, really important. And I want to push them to everybody here and come and work on people to get over their snarky, weirdo, anti-communist resistance to listening to this guy who's done more to think about all this shit and what's happening in the world and how to get out of it than, I'm sorry, Noam Chomsky, than Chris Hedges, than Cornel West, than any number of the other great intellectuals that are promoted to us as the greatest thinkers of our time. No, I'm sorry. Check out a